Welcome everyone to our Freedom's Voices presentation this evening. And I am very excited to host this with our distinguished panel, all of family members, actually. This is a reunion of the pipeline fighters family. And I see that in the chat, we have people from, y'all go ahead and just call out in the chat where you're from. We have people from all over the country here joining us. It's thrilling to have everybody because your presence here lets us know that you understand the existential threat of what these pipelines represent to our country. And you are here because you want to find answers and solutions to this, and that's what we hope to provide tonight. So we always start our Freedom's Voices presentations with a prayer and pledge, so I'll just do the honors here real quickly. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Go before us, O Lord, in all our doings, and further us with thy continual help, that every prayer and work of ours may begin in thee and by thee be duly ended. In the name of Jesus Christ, thy Son, our Lord, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. And we will, if you have a flag handy, I don't have a picture, an image, but we will also pledge the flag. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, that's the proper way if we want to win this fight, we got to put God first and love of country there too. And of course, right in the middle is our love of family. So let me introduce our panel to you. I don't know if everybody can see exactly what I'm seeing, but on the screen to my side is Steve Kinkle, who is a former 12-year veteran of Shelby County, Iowa County Commission. He was the chairman of that county commission for the past 2 years. He has since retired, but as we were talking before we came on here, he said retirement is very active because he is sticking in this pipeline fight. He is my one representative tonight from Iowa, so welcome, Steve. My other panelists here are from South Dakota. We're probably still celebrating a little bit because some pipeline victories that we've had recently in South Dakota. Representative Carla Lems is now the Speaker pro tempore of South Dakota State Legislature, State House. Ed Fishback is a farmer and an affected landowner and one of the real bulldogs in this fight, the grassroots fight. He is probably the lead bulldog, wouldn't you say, Ed? And then we have Senator Mark Lepke, who is also an affected landowner. He's a rancher in South Dakota, and I've interviewed him several times, and it's so good to see you again. Thank you to everyone for joining. Can I go ahead and get each one of you to, if any of you want to make a little opening statement about this, and then we're gonna delve into what's happened in South Dakota. Steve, you can kick us off.
Okay, I'll give you a little background myself. I got started in this fight going on 4 years, and I'm a 5th-generation. I live on a century farm here in Iowa, and when I got started, if you'd have told me then that almost 4 years from then I would still be dealing with this pipeline, I thought you were crazy. And I didn't know anything about CO2 pipelines, and our county was the first county in Iowa to draft a zoning ordinance on CO2 pipelines. 4 days after we passed the zoning ordinance, and Summit was at 3 of the 4 public hearings, they sued us, and they sued my other 2 supervisors individually. And so we are in federal district court, 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, and we're waiting for a ruling sometime between May and August to see if ordinance authority will hold up here in Iowa.
Yep, absolutely. Carla, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Carla Lems from Canton, South Dakota, present legislator. When I started this fight, I was not a legislator yet. I had been planning to run for office. I got a letter from Navigator and another one from Summit saying that both pipelines were going to be coming through my family's property. Knew right away, I read it, I was like, this is the Green New Deal. I'm not interested in participating. And then, of course, we found out that they could actually use eminent domain for this project. We also had to make sure that people understood that us in this fight, we're not against pipelines, we're not against ethanol, but we are against using eminent domain for something that is not a public use, and that is for a foreign out-of-state backed foreign-backed company. And so anyway, we forged ahead. I got elected, and it's been 3 years of battle in the legislature to get something passed that would substantially help the landowners in our state. And this last session, we were able to do that, passed HB 1052. Mark Lapka on the call as well. He was the prime sponsor in the Senate. And basically that bill said that they cannot use eminent domain for a carbon monoxide pipeline in our state.
That's right. And bravo. Mark, do you want to follow up her since you held that in the Senate?
Well, good evening and hello, everybody. I'm Mark Lopke. I'm a fifth generation farmer and rancher from Leola, South Dakota. I was never one that wanted to be involved with politics. I'm a farmer and rancher by trade, and it's that property, that land, that has led to a wonderful life for me and my family, and I want to see that continue in the future. And when we had a issue like this arise that let us kind of know that we don't have the freedoms that we believed that we did have, I felt no other reason to get involved, because you may not want anything to do with politics, but politics, unfortunately, has everything to do with you. I've never ran for an elected office in my life. I've met very wonderful people, many on this call along the way, and I spent a long time looking for somebody from my area to run for our state Senate seat. And, you wake up one morning and you look, and I had an overwhelming amount of encouragement and decided that, if you're going to do something about it, you better roll up your sleeves and go do it. I've worked hand in hand with Representative Lems over the last 3 years, and I can tell you she is just an absolute stalwart. The way she worked and her determination, motivated me to do more to help. And you can get more done from the inside, unfortunately, than you can the outside. I was honored that Representative Lems asked me to prime HB 1052 in the Senate. And I'll tell you, it just was a remarkable experience just to see the way that the citizens of South Dakota rose up to protect those freedoms and liberties that we enjoy.
Absolutely. But the battle is won, but the war is still on, right? And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. And I thought that Ed Fishbach could introduce that topic.
Yeah, hi. My name is Ed Fishbach. I am a fourth generation farmer in Spink County near Millette, South Dakota. I got involved in this fight when I got my letter in the mail one day as my wife and I were traveling to Minnesota to my niece's wedding. And we took the mail, and I got about 100 miles down the road as I was driving, and she started thumbing through the letters and opened it up. And here was this notice from a company called Summit Carbon Solutions based out of Iowa that we'd never heard of before. And they had a map of my property, wanted to go through 2 quarters and another 80 acres of my land right where I live. And then they had a copy in there that I was supposed to fill out and let them come survey within a week or 10 days or so. They wanted to come as soon as possible. And of course, there was a cover letter in there telling us how great this was going to be, and we were all going to get rich off of it if we signed up for this project. It just didn't smell right to me at the time, because no one had ever heard anything about this. It was almost like a sneak attack on us. And so I just decided that this wasn't for me. And as I stated earlier in the chat before we had the meeting, that's where I met Mark and Carla. When we started this, Summit held a public meeting in our closest town of Aberdeen here right away shortly after that, and told us how great this was all going to be. And the room was packed. And then they opened it up for questions when they got done giving their presentation. And I got up and I asked the first question if they would rule out the use of eminent domain, and they didn't want to answer my question. So I pursued that question about 3 times before I finally got an answer, and they said that they would not rule out eminent domain. In fact, they would use it. That's when the whole crowd got angry. And then when I sat down, this young man in front of me, about 5 rows, got up and he told them how he felt and that he wasn't in support of it because of the eminent domain and other issues. And that was Senator Mark Lapke, who I'd never met before. That's where it all started, because Mark was so upset he left the room. But after another young man ahead of me got up and spoke then too, also, and told him he didn't want anything to do with it. And that was a young man by the name of Jared Bosley, and hopefully we can talk about him and his situation a little bit here tonight. But they ended up cutting the meeting off, and those of us, as we were leaving the convention center, went out in the lobby, And we came running up to one another, Mark and I did, and we exchanged cell phone numbers and said, we have to organize. We can't allow this to go forward. This is an attack on our property rights. We don't want this company. They're not honest. They didn't answer our questions. We knew something was wrong. And that's how it all got started here in South Dakota. And I'll quickly say, then I met Carla Lems a few months later because by chance, a cousin of mine had a lake home next door to this lady and her husband who was thinking of running for office and was on our side in the pipeline. And my cousin said, you have to get to know her because you guys are both on the same side. And so I met her in Mark's hometown at Leola when he held a rally up there in front of their courthouse that was well attended. And that's where we all got started. So this is a pipeline family. We've gotten to know one another all over the state, and we're all in this together. No matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, there are people united on this issue, the issue of property rights and not allowing eminent domain for a private company and private gain.
Amen. And I just want to add too, I see that a lot of people are checking in on our chat and saying where they're from, literally all over the country. And that's encouraging to me because a lot of people will say that this is just a Great Plains, just a Corn Belt issue. It's not affecting me. It's affecting, I feel sorry for you. Good luck, but it's not affecting me. Au contraire, mon frere, the Department of Energy has declared that they plan 96,000 miles of this pipeline across the United States, and that includes Alaska and Hawaii. A lot of states have already approved eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines, Pennsylvania being one of them. Alaska is another. I have the list over here. I have to look over to the side because I'm on my list over here. Alaska, Alabama, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, West Virginia, and Wyoming have all made plans to just open the gates wide for carbon capture pipelines. Carbon capture is nothing new. It's been around for decades. Companies have used it. They've captured their emissions, condensed the carbon dioxide, and used it as fracking fluid. And that's just where you inject the fluid into otherwise depleted oil and gas wells and extract more of those natural resources. Carbon dioxide, this carbon dioxide that they're capturing from these ethanol plants throughout the Corn Belt does have commodity use, and you could keep it in the state and make money off of it. But this is ridiculous that it's literally thousands of miles being shunted through thousands of miles of very, very valuable farmland, or some of the most valuable farmland in our country, to be buried, to be sequestered deep in underground caverns and not used at all for the purpose of saving Mother Earth. So that's just kind of a little in a nutshell. I won't even touch on it. It's extremely dangerous, the high pressures, and we can get into that too. But I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed in case you didn't know exactly what we're talking about. So I think I did a good job. If anybody else wants to chime in, if I left out any vital part, you can. But what I really want to go into right now is, yes, we've had this wonderful victory in South Dakota. We need more victories because there's a lot more going on here. Like I said, the Department of Energy, they have a map of the country. There is no state that is left untouched by these carbon capture pipelines that they have planned for us, and it's coming to a neighborhood near you. So let's talk about first what is going on Capitol Hill, because is it possible, anyone from South Dakota, you can answer this. Is it possible that the federal government could just wipe away the good that you've done?
Well, I guess I'll take that one to start with. I was in Washington, a group of us, along with several other states, groups that were there about a little over 2 weeks ago, trying to lobby to do away with the 45Q tax credit that's driving this whole thing, that's subsidizing these projects. It's a tax giveaway is what it is, and we need to stop that. Yes, there is concern. While we were there, unbeknownst to us, we came out of our congressman's office, our group in South Dakota, and walked out into the lobby of the office building, and there was all of Summit Carbon Solutions main people standing there. So they were down there lobbying. And what we were hearing is that they are lobbying. They're trying to get the administration possibly to issue a federal mandate for eminent domain that would preempt all the states. I really don't believe that would happen. I just think there would be such an outcry and a rebellion against that. I don't think the administration would go there. I hope not. The other thing that I do know, though, they're really pushing to increase the federal 45Q tax credit. That's what they were down there lobbying for. And there is legislation in there, and to show you that this is how nonpartisan this is, Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Alaska, and Michael Bennett, Democrat from Colorado, are trying to raise that, which is at $85 a ton right now, to $250 a ton in the Senate. But luckily in the House, we have a couple good patriots like Representative Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, a conservative Republican, and Representative Ro Khanna from the Silicon Valley of Democrat from California are sponsoring legislation in the House to do away with the 45Q tax credit. We really want to push that bill. Both of these gentlemen are working together and trying to get this repealed, and that's the thing that we were lobbying for down there. But there is the effort in DC to supersede the state's authority. Hopefully we can stop that too. I don't think our own congressional delegation here in South Dakota would go for that. I know they would realize that for their own sake, it would be political suicide if they went for something like that. And I don't see a lot of other ones going for that. It's the 45Q thing that's driving this whole thing. And that's what the mood is, to increase that, to fund all these things and keep going.
Right. I want to just explain to everybody, 45Q is a section of the IRS tax code, and it allows for these massive tax credits for companies that put pipelines in. But most recently, they've added a direct pay loophole where you can say, I don't want the credit, I'd rather have the cash in hand. And we're talking billions of dollars. They've put this in the infrastructure bill in 2021, the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022. Literally billions of dollars available. That's why these companies are all of a sudden hot to trot on putting in carbon capture pipelines. It's one of the reasons, not the only one, right? I've got some questions that have already started popping up. And so I'm just going to start throwing these out for y'all. Steve, you can probably handle this first one. One of our attendees says, I live in Iowa. How do we stop this carbon capture in Iowa? And you have already put together a list of how we stop them, right?
Yes, I put together a list probably about a year and a half ago of what supervisors, commissioners can do. It's called my checklist. It's about 14 items they can do to get proactive. How do you protect your county, your economic development, your citizens? That's one. The second one is get involved. We have an outstanding landowners group in our state. And if we get legislation passed in the House and Senate and goes to the governor's desk, it's not going to be because of Steve Kankel. It's going to be because of this landowner group that we have. They meet every week during session. This group does. And the Sierra Club has been working with them and helping them get organized. They've been troopers, and we all can learn a lot from them. And there's what keeps us going.
Right, absolutely. And we are going to put a link to that, to his 12, it's your little 12-step program, isn't it, Steve? I like to call it your 12-step program because it's getting rid of carbon capture pipelines. But we will put a link to that and have this webinar available on jbs.org and standyourground.watch. By the way, we are premiering, and I should have said that earlier, we are premiering our documentary about this issue in 2 weeks from now. And we'll have a live webinar again to premiere it. And you can go to standyourground.watch to get more information about that documentary, and also to view this panel discussion once we're not live, once it's just we're recording. I'm going to go on to the next. I'm sorry, did you have something else, Steve?
Rebecca, I was also going to say, in your New American Magazine, I wrote an article in there a year ago. This has come out in March of 2024, and it's called CO2 Pipelines, Trampling of Your Property Rights and Local Control. And it gives you a personal thing of how we've been tackling it here in Iowa and how involved we've been.
Yes, exactly. And that I will put a link to that when we post this video, definitely. And you can also go on thenewamerican.com to find that article.
And
the next
and the checklist is included in there.
Exactly.
It's in that article.
And it's a great checklist. It's very practical. It's all things that can absolutely easily be done now before you've got the guns pointed pointed straight at you. The next person asked, why are we even talking about this? Isn't Trump taking care of this? And everybody needs to realize that that 45Q tax credit has been around since, was it the Bush administration or the Clinton administration when it started? And every single administration since then, since the 1990s, has upped that tax credit to where now it's $85 per ton of CO2 captured. But Trump also had upped the tax credit to $50 per ton. So we need to realize Trump, he's not Jesus. Did I answer that well, Mark? Do you want to add to that?
Well, it is curious that that hasn't been dealt with yet. I'm optimistic that it will be, with the Doge program that is currently operating in DC. They're looking to save our government a lot of money. And let's talk about the money that's involved with all this. With the Summit carbon pipeline, they had a projected capacity of about 20 million metric tons. At the $85 million per metric ton tax credit that they could receive from the federal government, that's about $1.75 billion a year of American taxpayer dollars. Currently, there's a 12-year sunset on them. They can only accumulate that for that period of time. And that's for this one system. There's other systems starting to pop up throughout the United States. Indiana's been looking at it. Illinois, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Nebraska, Wyoming, and the states in the Midwest here. And currently there's about 5,100 miles of CO2 pipeline in the country, the longest of which is about 294 miles. And they're projecting that within 15 to 20 years, there'll be upwards of 90,000 miles of this pipe across the country, just intended to sequester carbon dioxide. The only way that it is capable of existing is with this heavy government. It's not even subsidization, it's socialization. Because what have pipelines always been? They've been intended as a transportation avenue to deliver a commodity to a consumer at a cheaper level of transportation, saving all of us dollars. They have a definite public use. This is a lot different than that. It's a boondoggle. It's an extraction of dollars out of the taxpayer pockets in order to concentrate them into a few number of pockets. And that's what the pipelines are the most efficient at. And I think it's quite clear to me that if we want to save the American taxpayer an enormous amount of money, let's just stop doing this and get back to good business.
Absolutely. I do have a question from another attendee who is asking us to explain exactly what the pipeline's supposed to do. Where does the CO2 come from? They want more information because they're not as up on this issue as some of us are. So, Carla, did you want to try a stab at that?
Sure. So the CO2, what they want to do is establish a pipeline network that will connect to the ethanol plants throughout our state and Iowa and any state that they're going through. So this particular Summit pipeline was going to be in 5 different states. And so they want to establish a route that will connect to the ethanol plants to capture the CO2 at the smokestacks, which is a very pure form of the CO2. They want to pressurize that in a pipe at 2,200 PSI and put that all the way, bring it to North Dakota and bury it in a rock formation in the ground. And that's where the sequestration comes into place. Now, you and I know something known as photosynthesis, and we know that we need CO2 for life itself, for plants, for our livestock, for all of those things, right? And so I believe it was said on the House floor by Representative Marty Overweg, this is a fake project. We are going to take CO2 out of the atmosphere for the purpose of supposedly climate change, and we need to reduce that. And so, again, it's all tied into the CI scores, the carbon intensity scores that they come up with at, the GREET model. And then, so they're supposed to get all these credits for if they are helping with sustainability and, climate change and all of that. And so that's where all of this incentive is built into the tax credit, the 45Q tax credit, bringing it in and burying it in the ground. And again, those of us that are paying attention just call that the fake project that is taking not only our tax dollars to do this, but also for those of us that are along the pipeline route, they wanted to take our land as well. So that's where we are in that. And if I could just touch very quickly, on what we do to combat these things. This will be across the board, not only for a pipeline project, but you have got to create a network. You have to have a network of people that will come together on these things, because the pipeline, it could come or go, but it's gonna come to you in one way or another. We have other property rights issues that are happening in our state, and I know many of you on the chat as well. We had to approach this because we had a really bad bill that passed in 2024 that was basically, they called it the Landowner Bill of Rights, and in effect, it was the Pipeline Bill of Rights. And so we had to come at that in South Dakota with a referred law. But in order to fight that, we had to create a network of people, of counties, of everything that we could come together in a grassroots effort to fight this. And we were able to do that. And we won in 65 out of the 66 counties in our state. But we could not have done that with just a few legislators working together. That took an army of people. And that is what it takes to win some of these things.
Amen. Absolutely. We have somebody else asking, and any of y'all can take this. I know the answer too, and this is very important. Is the high pressure in the carbon capture pipelines the danger, or is it the concentrated CO2? And the answer to that is both. Ed, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, it's both. CO2 is plant food basically on its own. We all know that. But what they want to do is to take the CO2 out of these ethanol plants and get in on the subsidy. And yeah, they have to put it under 2200 to 2300 PSI, pounds of pressure, which on a natural gas line, it's about 700. So it's much more dangerous. But with the pressure, they also have to heat it to 120 degrees Fahrenheit to keep that constant, to make it into change it from a gas to a liquid form called, let's see, Mark, what's the right word? I'm slipping my mind. Right. Yeah. And so that's what they call it, to make it flow into the pipeline. And then they're sending it up into North Dakota on our pipeline that's coming through South Dakota to basically sequester it underground, supposedly forever. But that's what it is. And it's just like Carla said, it's a scam. It's totally taxpayer subsidized scam. They're all getting taxpayer money. None of this would stand on its own. And if it wasn't for the 45Q tax credit, we wouldn't be talking about these things. But yeah, that's what it is. It's a supercritical stage put into there so it would flow through the pipeline. And that's where the danger is. If it ruptures, which it has, there was an incident in Satarsha, Mississippi a few years ago, and it's an asphyxiant, folks. It robs all the oxygen from the atmosphere. And down there, they had to evacuate the whole town. There were like 45 or 46 people that were sent to the hospital. People were unconscious, gasping for air. Your car engines will stall out because they can't get oxygen. The CO2 is robbing the oxygen from the area. It's just too dangerous to be around there. It's just ridiculous to even be talking about something like this. And as Carla said, it's nothing more than an attempt to grab and take our land from us.
I have a really great question that's been asked, and one of you two legislators should answer this, or maybe both of you. Can a state nullify a federal attempt to enforce eminent domain? One of y'all want to take a stab at that, Carla or Mark?
Well, that's a good question. You know, a lot of the times the way that the federal government operates is that they create these rules, and if the state is not going to follow them, they cut off the money. And that's been a lot of the way that they've controlled the states over the years. You know, I think that's wrong. That's holding states hostage. You know, what is the United States of America at the end of the day? It's a union of all the states. States' rights are supposed to be higher than the federal government. I still believe in state sovereignty, and you know, if it comes down to it, we're going to have to do what we need to protect ourselves. But I don't think that we're there yet. America still is the greatest country in the world, and we'll just see how that shakes out.
Carla, did you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I would just say as well, I mean, obviously, I think all of us as states, we need to shore up our laws. And we also even need to work across our borders with other states. That's what we've been trying to do, for instance, through the Free Soil Coalition based in Iowa. But several of us legislators in other states have joined on to this. And we need to work together to shore up our state laws to protect our citizens. You know, our government is supposed to be there to protect our inherent rights. And those rights really, I mean, they come from God ultimately, but they are encapsulated in our Bill of Rights and our Constitution. And that is what we as legislators are here first and foremost to do, is to protect the rights of the people that we represent. And so that is, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer that we have to come together. We have to do that first. And if the federal government itself is coming after those rights, I would hope that our attorney generals and those people throughout our states, that's why elections are important. Elections do have consequences. And so in our state, for instance, we had to kind of flush out the swamp in South Dakota. We had a lot of corporatists, I call them, in office, and we were able to do that in our last primary election and get rid of about, well, there were 14 that were overturned. Most of them were on the other side of this issue. But we had to wake up the people. Again, it comes back to the people raising their voice and putting a wall, if you will, around our states to say, federal government, you can come in here and do, and we can work with you. But if you're going to come after our people, then we're going to fight back.
Right. And, you know, one thing that I think Ed just mentioned and several people have mentioned now, if it weren't for the 45Q tax credit, we wouldn't be facing this right now. That is true in a micro sense when we're talking about Summit Carbon Solutions and the carbon capture pipeline throughout the Corn Belt. However, would you all agree, and this is the premise that we put forward in the documentary, that the carbon capture pipelines are just a microcosm of what they have planned under Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, which comes from the United Nations. Of course, George Bush signed us onto it in the 1990s, and ever since then, it's just exploded from there. And when they implemented Agenda 21 under the Clinton administration in the United States, they wrote in the Millennium Papers, when I say they, he had a special commission, presidential commission to implement Agenda 21 at the local level all across the United States. But they said, and they wrote this in their Millennium Papers, we're not going to use the name Local Agenda 21 because that'll bring out all the crazy conspiracy theorists, tinfoil hat wearing crazies. We're going to call them comprehensive plans or smart growth or smart planning, one of those words. And those were the words they used. And everywhere you go in the United States of America, no matter what city or town or county you go to, you're going to find these comprehensive plans. And they have all the buzzwords, the sustainable development and everything straight out of Agenda 21. So this isn't tinfoil hat stuff, you know. So what have y'all seen? Steve, I want you especially to take this because somebody asked here in the questions, will it help to alert your county sheriff's department, no matter what state you're in? Can you address this, that even if it weren't for the 45Q tax credit, they have this and other plans for us to take away our private property rights?
It seems to be the case, but I think a lot of it has to do with greed. I mean, greed ruins a lot of good people. And if it wouldn't be for these tax credits, yeah, you might have other things coming on. But in our state, we need more people. We need people like Mark and Carla to come over and educate our senators, because right now, our state, we have a trifecta with our House, our Senate, and our governor. And our House really has a pulse of the people, and they've been giving bills to the Senate for the past 3 years. And just a couple of weeks ago, they passed 82% eminent domain bill for don't allow that authority for CO2 pipelines. And in a poll in our state 2 years ago, 78% of the people of Iowa do not want CO2 pipelines to have that luxury of eminent domain. And yet our Senate, when the bills go over there, they stonewall it. And just so happens the guy that's the chair of our Commerce Commission, where the subcommittee where it goes to, he was a former employee of Summit Carbon Solutions. And so those are the things we're dealing here, and our governor has been silent on that. But I was a elected Republican myself, and it says right in our Iowa platform that we protect property rights. But it seems like that doesn't hold true when greed comes in there. And I told a few senators last week, I said, they always want to say, well, we don't have the votes or leadership's going a different way. I said, you guys put these people in leadership. You've known that for 3 years. And I said, this leadership is turning you guys into a bunch of rhinos. And they don't like to hear that, but that's actually what's going on. And we need more people that have courage, like what went on up in South Dakota. And I am so proud of what they did up there, because we know this can be done. And I know that if nothing happens in Iowa again this year, there's probably going to be organized movement to remove some people from our Senate, just like happened up in South Dakota.
Mm-hmm. Carla, you were nodding your head when I was talking about how this relates to Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Would you like to elaborate more on that?
Sure. It reminded me, I wrote a letter to then Governor Noem in April 13th, 2023. I was just coming off my first year as serving in the House. And I remember sitting at my desk and I'm like, I have to write a letter. And I need to say, put her on notice of, why aren't you standing with the people? You've always said you would stand with the people. And so I'm just going to read to you. I just brought this up on my phone here. And I had 20-some legislators sign on to this letter. But I said, we affirm the following: the Green New Deal that has been thrust upon South Dakota due to the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals does not fit with our Bill of Rights. The false narrative that says ESG scores tied to the net zero carbon score will repair the damage caused by capitalism goes against the very nature of our founders. Companies that stand to benefit from these projects do so at the expense of the property rights of the individuals. And then all of these things coming down from the World Economic Forum. And I know I generally avoid this topic because a lot of people, their eyes glaze over and they don't understand what I'm talking about. But the very big picture of this is coming down from even above our United States, Senate and House and even presidency. It's coming from the World Economic Forum. And I do appreciate that Trump got us out of the Paris Climate Agreement. We're moving hopefully more in that direction. But again, we have to watch very vigilantly against these things, because like you said, it has infiltrated at all of these different levels, whether it's townships or counties or state legislatures or whatever. And these things are coming. And of course, we're reminded that Klaus Schwab said, you will own nothing and you will be happy. This is about the land. This is about them getting control of the land, because what happens? If you control the land, you control the food. And if you control the food, you control the people. That's what this is about.
Amen to that. Also, let's talk about, a lot of people are like, oh, don't worry, Trump's in the White House, everything will be taken care of now. Well, that's not exactly true. Let's talk about Doug Burgum. Who wants to address that? Ed, you seem eager.
Well, I remember here about 3 years ago, I heard Doug Burgum on a Fargo radio station talk show. And he was taking a position then that he would never allow Summit Carbon Solutions to use eminent domain on farmers in North Dakota, on landowners. And then all of a sudden, when he decided he was going to run for president and the money started pouring into him, he completely flipped. And that's where he's at now. And so that's basically what I know about him. But I would like to add, Rebecca, you're exactly right what Carla said about this land grab. And if you don't think that's true, all you have to do is look at the easement. Look at the terms of the easement that this company is getting people to sign. And when they sign a voluntary easement, it says right in there that you are letting the company, giving them the authority perpetually, that means forever, to either sell the easement on you on your land. They can gift it. They can give it to anybody. They basically control the whole piece of ground in addition to the 5.5 acre easement or whatever it is that they get. You have no control. You still technically own it. You pay all the taxes, but you have to ask them for permission to do anything. You cannot build anything on it. You cannot, you can farm over it, but they have total control of your land. You can't even in the future, if you decide to will that or sell it or will it to anybody down the road, one of your kids or grandkids, you have to get permission from Summit Carbon to be able to do that. They have to approve of anything you do with that land in the future. People really need to look at these easements and be very wary because it is a land grab. And the other thing is, if you sign these easements willingly, and like even in South Dakota, the few people that have done that, if we get this thing stopped, they will never get that easement back. Summit still owns that forever. You have given that away voluntarily. The only way that you can ever get your property back is if you would be forced to give it up through an eminent domain proceeding. Then you can go back and get your property back. That happened in Nebraska. The attorney that represents all of us here in South Dakota, Brian Jordy, he fought landowners on the Keystone oil pipeline that got canceled. And those that were condemned, he went into court and got their easements rescinded and they got their land back. But people that signed that voluntarily gave that away forever. And so this is a land grab and people better be aware of it. And that's why I told people all along, I don't know why anyone would sign that easement. I know it's hard, it's tempting, the money that they throw at people. But my philosophy has always been, why would you do that to your kids or your grandkids or your neighbors and do that to them and bind them forever? That's a perpetual easement. So, but Burgum, he's another story. He's a real gem. He's never going to support us. He's a corporate elitist. He's following the money, and that's where he's at. Unfortunately, he's in the position that he can do us a lot of damage, and that is really upsetting to me.
Well, that brings up another question that's been asked. Which agencies are pushing these pipelines and is the Trump administration supporting? So we've kind of already answered that, but let's talk about, of course, Department of Interior. That's what Doug Burgum's in charge of now, right? Great. Yikes. He's in charge of managing all of the, not just federal lands, but all of the natural resources on federal lands, water, minerals, all of this. Let's talk about PHMSA though. PHMSA is the Federal Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. They've been regulating carbon capture pipelines since the 1990s. They don't have carbon specific regulations though, right? And they were working on them and about to publish them when we had the changeover to Trump. So who can give me an update about what's going on there?
I guess I can start. Yeah, the final rules were set to come out, and when Trump got inaugurated, they've been put on hold, and nothing's been moving forward. So that's very disappointing. And I know with PHMSA, and when you look at setbacks, PHMSA has no setbacks, the federal agency. So when you talk about safety, people, there's no setbacks at the federal level. We have no setbacks at the state level. Our lawsuit that we have in federal court is about, say, local control and having setbacks to protect our people and safety. And if we lose that, there's no setbacks out there to help protect us. And that's almost unbelievable.
Just to explain what he's talking about is the setbacks are the actual physical distance that the pipeline must be away from. Steve, give me the list there. School.
Okay, right. Yeah, like in our setbacks, we have a minimum distance of 1,000 feet from residents, or we have a lot of animal confinements out here. And so we have 1,000 feet for that. We have a 1/4 mile from any public facility, schools, nursing home, hospitals. We have a 1/2 mile for recreational areas. We have 2 miles from any incorporated area with a variance. So if you can prove that, hey, we can keep it safe and we won't hurt your economic development areas, because when you look at any incorporated area, where's the growth areas? That's on the outskirts of town for your housing, your industrial parks. Also, that's your future tax base. And so, like I was talking earlier, the little town I live next to, Erling, Iowa, we had a 2-mile setback that's been there for 23 years to protect our economic development areas. When Summit Carbon came, they totally ignored it. And that was there for 23 years. And they keep saying, well, you people are changing the rules in the middle of the game. You heard it up in South Dakota too. Well, that's not true. We were here way before trying to protect our interests, but they don't care. And they're so disrespectful of the landowner, what we're trying to do here, what we're trying to protect, our economic development, our way of life. And that's what's so sad. We have to fight this hard to protect our rights, our landowners' rights, for something that does not serve a public purpose at all. It's a private economic development project. And folks, if this continues and something would get overturned in South Dakota, we need to keep following what South Dakota did. But if it goes back the other way, Lord help us all, because the wind people now, the solar, they follow setbacks. And a lot of them are a quarter to half a mile away. Well, if we lose this and they want to put it 200 feet from your house or 400 feet from a neighbor, that might be reality.
And talk about the kill zone.
Yeah.
Put the setback in perspective with a kill zone around, say, a pipeline rupture.
Well, I can just speak for my county. We just have an 8-inch line now going through our county. They can go up, according to the easement, up to 24 inches. They can change that at any time, but the kill zone for an 8-inch line is right at 600 feet in a few minutes. And we have a couple residences in our county out in the country that are within 200 feet. We have 13 that are in the kill zone.
That is crazy.
That is crazy. And then you take along something like Erling. Erling's a town of about 600 and some. And it's all going to depend on which way the wind's blowing. If there happens to be a rupture at that time, you could take out the whole town. Then they want to do shelter in place. And we talked to the EMA director down at Satartia, Mississippi, and he actually came up to the Iowa Utility Board hearings. And he said if they would have did that down there, because they had to aerate the homes 16 or 17 hours after the event happened in order to let people go back into their homes safely, they would have died. So
if I could just add in to jump on what Steve said, that first responder from Satartia, Mississippi also testified at the Public Service Commission hearing in North Dakota. And he said they found victims 9 miles away from the rupture. They found dead wildlife, dead animals 9 miles away. That's how far it could carry, depending on the wind conditions and other factors. And I would just like to also interject, we've had a little better luck here in South Dakota with our counties passing ordinances and setbacks. And I want to give a shout out, because the 3 most northern counties here in South Dakota that go up to North Dakota border, Marks County of McPherson, Brown County is where the city of Aberdeen is the county directly south. And then directly south of them is my county of Spink. And all 3 of those county commissions, early on, about 3 years ago, when we went to their meetings many times and got them to adopt ordinances and put in setbacks. In my county of Spink, we have a wonderful ordinance. We have a half-a-mile setback from any home, and also a 2-mile setback from a high concentration area, which is described as a school or a nursing home or a hospital or town of more than 100 people. So we have a great ordinance. McPherson County has one similar. I think they have a mile setback. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. Brown County has a little bit less of a one, but it's also very effective. What that got them, Summit Carbon sued all 3 of those counties and tried to intimidate them and scare them from and get them to rescind that. And those 3 counties unanimously, all 3 counties have stood firm and have held and have never backed away. And once our Public Utilities Commission denied the permit here in 2023, those lawsuits got dismissed. But right now in South Dakota, this Thursday of this week, our Public Utilities Commission is holding their board meeting, and Summit Carbon Solutions now has called for a indefinite suspension of their permit application. They have reapplied for another permit after being rejected. So we're going before them this Thursday, and our landowner group, through our attorney, is asking for them to throw out the application completely and tell Summit to start all over if and when they can ever come up with a route. Because right now in South Dakota, with our eminent domain law that our legislature just passed, they have no route. They have no way to get a route. They can't survey. Our Supreme Court has weighed in South Dakota and stood with the landowners and sided with us. They've ruled that Summit is not a common carrier. They don't have the right to eminent domain. They ruled that the CO2 they're transporting is not a commodity. They have also ruled that Summit Carbon Solutions is not a trustworthy company because they withheld information that landowners were entitled to during the court process. They really have come down hard on Summit as a company. And so that's where we're at. But this Thursday, we have a very important thing going on in South Dakota. We're going to find out if our Public Utilities Commission is going to grant Summit this indefinite postponement of their permit application. If they do that, then we're still in the fight. If they would accept our motion to throw it out, I think we're in pretty good hands, and I think we can end this thing once and for all. But as of now, because of our eminent domain law, Summit Carbon Solutions has no real path in South Dakota. They're never going to get, I think they were at 49%, they said during the debate on the eminent domain bill, of easements they have in the state. After almost 4 years, they can't even get 50% and voluntary easements. So we're in good shape here, and we are the firewall. We are going to hold firm here in South Dakota. There's been rumors without South Dakota, they may try to go around us and reroute through other states, but nothing is definite yet. But we're hanging in there, and I have to give a shout out to those 3 county commissions that stood firm and passed the ordinances, and someone has tried every tactic they could through lawsuits, intimidation, bribery even, and they have held firm and have not caved. And our PUC has ruled already that those ordinances were fair and reasonable.
I have a
Say,
lot.
say Rebecca, could I just jump in real quick?
Yes, absolutely, Mark.
I'd just like to go back a little bit and kind of explain to everybody about what is so much different about this type of a pipeline versus others, because they're going to be collecting the CO2 from ethanol plants. And what they'll do with it is they'll run it through giant compressors and compress that CO2 down into what they refer to as that high dense phase CO2. That makes it a lot more dense, makes it a lot more affordable and efficient to transport. And see, the problem that comes, in order to maintain that phase, they have to keep it under 2,300 PSI in that pipeline. The pressure is immense. Well, in the event of a rupture, what happens is that CO2 comes back out, it converts back to a gas from that state, and it expands in volume by 535 times to 1. For quite some time, a lot of it dependent on weather conditions, it's heavier than air, so it falls to the ground. It'll move along following low-lying areas, move along with the wind. It's real similar to fog. And so that's always been the concern as far as safety. Where's it all going to go? The companies have never been very transparent as far as what they refer to as plume dispersion modeling. And so you're just sit here wondering what is in fact going to happen. Now, back to the PHMSA rules, something there that was puzzling to me as well, because per Ed's comments here a little bit ago, after 4 years with 700 miles of proposed route in South Dakota, the company is only at 49%. They've never been very successful at obtaining buy-in on this type of a project. South Dakotans just do not want it. And so the amount of eminent domain in itself was going to be the largest use of eminent domain ever in the state of South Dakota in the first place. But per the PHMSA rules, They wanted to classify an area 2 miles either side of the pipe. So you got 700 miles of proposed route. You have 2 miles either side of it. That's 4 miles. That's 1.8 million acres of South Dakota land that was going to be classified as a high risk area. What does that all mean when the government's getting involved here? You know, it just has always looked like a land grab from the beginning. You learn more as the process keeps going on, and it's just something we don't want in our state of South Dakota.
Absolutely. Does anything about Trump's recent declaration, you know, reversal that CO2 is a pollutant, which of course we all know it's not, it's plant food. We need it for life on Earth. But is that good? Is that helping at all, or does that have any effect on this at all?
Well, I guess, you know, I don't consider CO2 a pollutant in the first place. You know, like it's said, we've learned it in elementary school. Plants utilize it. They give off the oxygen that we breathe. I hope it's not a pollutant, because if we start burying this 10,000 feet under the ground, you got to remember, what is CO2? It's 2 parts oxygen, 1 part carbon. We're going to be sequestering twice as much of the oxygen that we as humans need to breathe. And so I don't think it ever should have been a pollutant. I think it's a natural occurring gas, and we just need to let Mother Nature do its thing. Our planet's always evolving, and it's the way it always has been. It's the way it always should be.
All right, Carla, you were going to say something too, I think.
Well, I was just gonna chime in a bit. You know, obviously we have hopes that this is going to move our way in the federal government. I know it's been talked about with Doge. I mean, if you want to talk about a waste of money, this is an immense waste of taxpayer money. However, like was said before, you know, we've seen this building through the, well, it was under George W. Bush, I believe it was 2008 was when this started. And then every single administration we saw, they upped the ante, they upped the ante. And so here we are at $85 a sequestered ton. And Ed, I believe, talked about that a bit. What is curious to me is what is going to happen, because we can all see it for what it is. That this is a land grab, this is a waste of taxpayer money, but somebody wants this done. And of course, it's, you know, the investors in Summit were Harold Hamm, who is a big oil tycoon, Bruce Rastetter, who is made a lot of money in ethanol, has ethanol plants in Brazil. We also saw, well, Continental Resources, which is a big oil company. But we also saw these same individuals and companies giving, I don't know about companies, but individuals giving campaign donations to Trump. And I'm a Trump supporter, okay? So I'm hoping that he sees through this. Obviously, we have people on the other side that probably gave money to that campaign too. But I am hoping, and what we're hoping in South Dakota is that they don't up the ante again, because I can tell you, if this goes to $250 a ton, they are going to be back. They are going to work hard to replace people. You can't imagine the amount of money that was spent against us with the RL21 effort. And again, they are pitting those of us who have been supporters of ethanol, who you know, support our utilities, who support our you know, natural gas, all the things that all of us need that come through a pipeline. We support those things. But they're painting a picture that we are anti-pipeline, that we are anti-economic development, what we are against ethanol, all of those things, when in fact that is just not true. But that's how they're going to come about this, and then they're going to try to primary a lot of us legislators who have stood against this and paint a picture of us. So we're going to have to very carefully craft our message back and say, no, that's not true. And in fact, but we also need to try, and I appreciate Ed going out to Washington, D.C. and talk to these, you know, our congressional delegations, saying to them, listen, and they have literally convinced these ethanol companies that they are going to go under if they do not get a certain carbon score, and that they, you know, they're not going to be able to compete. And so that is the other angle of this, is we have to be able to communicate to our ethanol companies that there are other ways, there are other things you can do. There is on-site capture and other things, but also we need to be pushing back against, I think this GREET model is where they come up with this CI score. And you know, we've all seen voodoo math before. I think this is voodoo math. And we need to be able and be educating yourselves on these things so that you can talk intelligently to your elected officials about these things and help them push back against the narrative.
You know, one of our questions has to do with water, and we haven't even talked about that. You know, it's not just a land grab here. This is a massive water grab as well in two different ways, because it takes so much water to capture carbon and put it into its supercritical state under that high pressure that Mark mentioned, and shuttle it up to a sequestration site deep underground. But then the water tables, who wants to address that part of it?
Well, I guess I could take a little stab at it, because I think one of the first water permits that was applied for was in my county of Spink County. Our ethanol plant applied for one. And our natural resources and ag department had approved that. And it only got tossed again because our Public Utilities Commission ruled against the permit. So it went out the window, but they were asking for 40 million gallons a year to draw out of the aquifer. And so we've heard reports, I know maybe Steve can talk about, I've heard in Iowa, there's companies asking for up to 120 million gallons a year. You're talking about 57 ethanol plants that are signed up for this, potentially on this Summit pipeline, this 2,500 mile pipeline. So if they average 70 or 80 million gallons a year times 57, the amount of water is just enormous. And the aquifers, you're right, Rebecca, they can't handle that. I mean, we had people in Spink County come into our county commission on the water permit in that county that were just upset. Businesses in our local small town of Redfield, South Dakota, that said that they would fold up because they're using water out of that aquifer. And they don't have enough pressure there hardly anymore now. And if they were drawing that down, that, like, we have one of the only outdoor theaters left in the state of South Dakota. It's been a landmark and it's kind of a deal in Redfield. And the owner came in and said, I'll have to shut that business down. It's been there for 100 years. And he said, I'll have to shut it off because I won't be able to stay in business. So we've had issues like that. And the water that's all starting to come out now. There's a rural water system in South Dakota. There's another company called Gevo that wants to come into our state out of Colorado. And they've been all getting all kinds of taxpayer subsidies, giveaways from our state. They want to make low carbon jet fuel. They haven't built in South Dakota yet, but they went to the rural water system that is in that area, and they got their board to give them or sign a contract with them to grant them all of the excess water that they have left on their system. So if that comes through, the people that are currently on the system, or anybody that wants to expand any farm that wants to expand their operation, or anybody that's got a son that wants to take over the farm and they want to build a house, they won't have enough capacity to hook those people up. I mean, so yeah, we are facing a real crisis on the usage of water. And then people have to consider there has to be wastewater through that process too. And where are they going to discharge all that? It's going to go right back into our rivers and our streams, and it's going to be highly concentrated in salts and gosh knows what else, and other kind of minerals. And so we're talking about massive amounts of gallons of water that are going to come back out into the streams and rivers, and who knows what that's going to do to them. So yeah, it's a real issue that people need to be thinking about too. But as somebody has said before, Carla, and I know Steve said, the greed that's out there, people in positions of power just don't seem to care about this. All they see is the dollar signs and who their campaign contributors are, and that's all they care about. Respect for human life and anything else just goes out the window, and I'm just so frustrated by that.
A lot of people are asking, what can I do on my home front to get ready for this, prepare for it, because they aren't they're in the middle of the battle like you are right now, but it's coming. You know, Pennsylvania, we know.
Organize.
Yeah.
That's what we did in South Dakota, like Mark and I did originally. And we just have to start from somewhere, and don't get discouraged. I mean, there's been a lot of times in our battle here in South Dakota that, you know, I don't know how many times I've lost count that people told me, you can't beat these people. They're too powerful. They have too much money. Well, folks, we've proven it in South Dakota that people can beat money. Like Carla said, our last election here in our RL21 battle in South Dakota, we had $3 million in advertising come in against us, and we couldn't match that. I think we had a budget of 225,000, and we won. We won 65 of the 66 counties. We rejected that, got a 60% vote in the statewide vote. We won every county where there was an ethanol plant located. So we took our message directly to the people. We had numerous landowner panels all over the state of South Dakota that Carla, Mark, myself, and other people went on and told our story. We couldn't match the money, but our message was true. Tell the truth, organize, get your facts straight, don't give up, and then focus on your elections. Like Carla said, elections have consequences. You have to throw out these people that won't listen. Contact your congressional delegations right now, because they're going to take this up in DC real soon. And if they're successful in getting this up to $250 a metric ton on a CO2, like you said earlier, Rebecca, there's no stopping them then. But you have to talk to your congressional delegation, your senators and your congressmen. I know it's tough because they see the dollar signs and a lot of them are on board with this, but you just have to keep the pressure on them.
Right. Absolutely. Go ahead, Steve.
I'd say you have a lot better chance of fighting this too if you don't have CO2 in your state now and there's no proposals. You can start working on eminent domain when you're not fighting a company in that out there, because this all snuck up on us here 4 years ago. We weren't even talking about any of this. And I really feel in our state in Iowa, besides we're not getting very far with our legislators, there's also 5 judicial review lawsuits against the Iowa Utility Commission for them honoring or permitting a permit to carbon solutions. And those court cases are going to start here April, May. So probably this summer or fall, we'll start getting some rulings on these judicial reviews. And then with our court case in federal court, 8th Circuit, ruling supposed to come out for ordinances in somewhere between May and August. And so I really feel we're going to get a court win here that'll throw this up in the air.
Yep, I hope so. I have somebody else who asked earlier about the easement land. Somebody said, how big is it? It's 100 feet, right? It's 50 feet and then 25 on either side. And you still, Mark, I think you're the one who told me you still, you as the original landowner still have the liability for that land, but you have to ask if anything. In fact, Mark Nelson in Iowa told me that in some of these easements say they restrict your use of firearms on the property once you haven't that easement signed. Is that true?
I guess that'd be a new one to me. I hadn't heard about any restrictions about firearms, but with everything I have heard, it certainly wouldn't surprise me either. You know, one of the problems here, and one's to ponder the question of why do they want to change the pollutant definition of CO2? All pretty much umbrella policies that cover farmers and ranchers' land have at the very end of the fine print what they refer to as a pollution exclusion. So as long as CO2 is considered a pollutant, and in the event of a rupture and a release, if say you would have obvious damage to property, possibly life, the farmer is liable. They don't have any protection. Obviously, if it's their own, it's not as big of a deal if it would affect their neighbor's property, or worse yet, their neighbors. And so it's an event that the company would probably come back in and sue the landowner if they were deemed to have done something that had been determined to be negligent. You know, what is the definition of negligent anymore? A lot of times on our farms during the fall, we'll have a high precipitation event. The fields are a little bit muddy. The snow's coming. You got to get out there. The equipment that we operate nowadays is very large and very heavy. If you drive over that pipe and cause a kink in it and a rupture when it's muddy out, is that negligent? We don't know. The bottom line is that there's effects there far beyond just that meets the eye, and you're talking about amounts of dollars that would just take any family farmer that ran in that type of a situation off of the land forever.
Right.
Could I just jump into and follow up on Mark? I mean, another danger, if you will, again, and I mentioned it a little bit, was the foreign ownership. I'm looking back at this letter that I wrote to the governor, and SKENS was one of the investors in Summit Carbon Solutions and was fined over $70 million for defrauding U.S. military contracts. BlackRock was a major investor in the Navigator pipeline. And in 2022, there were 19 state attorney generals that wrote to the Securities and Exchange Commission asking the agency to look into BlackRock's ties to China. And this is a quote from that article. BlackRock appears to use the hard-earned money of our state's citizens to circumvent the best possible return on investment, as well as their vote, the AG said in their letter. So again, we have these ties, and again, Summit, there was there was a tie that even our then governor mentioned in an article to the Silk Road Fund. And so again, there are nefarious characters that seem to be coming in and wanting to have investment in the property in some of the richest, most fertile farm ground in the United States of America.
Rebecca, I'd just like to add to Carla, she's exactly right. One more nefarious individual we have lobbying for Summit in our South Dakota legislature is also a registered foreign lobbyist for the country of Saudi Arabia. And he's got a retainer at $10,000 a month for Saudi Arabia, and he's lobbying on behalf of Summit.
Didn't he
Now,
used
why
to
in the
work
world
for,
would Saudi Arabia need a lobbyist in our South Dakota legislature?
right, and didn't he used to work for the governor? Wasn't he on staff for the governor at one point or something like that? I can't remember.
Well, he used to be an officer in the South Dakota Republican Party, but he's been removed from that
Okay.
now.
Okay,
But
that's right.
he's still a lobbyist, and he's out there promoting this pipeline for Summit. All the while, he's a registered lobbyist, foreign agent for Saudi Arabia. So
Right.
yeah, this is what we're up against. And if we
And
have
we also-
time yet, Rebecca, at some point in time, I'd like to get into a little bit of a situation here in South Dakota. If people think they can trust these kind of companies, what they did to someone like Jared Bosley, maybe we can talk about that a little bit. I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah, actually, I know time flies when you're having fun. We've been on for an hour and 15 minutes. Hey, I'm game, but it just depends upon y'all. I appreciate all of you so much taking this time with us, because all of this issue, I've said it before, this issue is like an onion. It has so many layers. You just keep peeling it back, and you start crying, and you peel more, and you cry more. But I did want to address one question. Then yeah, we can get into what happened to Jared, but also what happened to Mark. I remember that you said that y'all had to keep moving was it your father or your grandfather around in the assisted living because they were trying to come in and get him to sign the easement. And he didn't have the mental capacity to do so, is I think what you said. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had an elderly grandfather that was in his twilight in the nursing home. His name was still on the property. He didn't have power of attorney, but they didn't care about that. If they could get the signature of the man's name or woman's name that is on the deed, it would be a binding contract. And so we had to constantly move him around from room to room in there because they'd keep getting in there trying to harass these people that didn't have the mental capacity to deal with it. It wasn't the only case that happened like that. I'm aware of several other occurrences. They would prey on people that were a little bit more feeble, and quite frankly, it was disturbing. You don't treat people like that, and it's just part of the process that evolved over time, and it was just disgusting the way that humans were treated in this manner, and it's certainly not something that we wanted to see happen. And well, it's a lot of the reason why we're all doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. Somebody in here, two people have brought up the same issue about the situation that happened in Mississippi in 2020, the pipeline rupture. that the people were saved because there was a chemical odorant added to the CO2. CO2 in that form is invisible and has no odor, but the CO2 in this pipeline will not have an odorant. They want to keep it pure, and that begs the question, why, if you're going to sequester it underground just so it'll be hidden forever, supposedly, why do you need to keep it pure? I don't know if anybody wants to address that. I mean, I know that that gets into the area of speculation, but maybe I'll have some more insight into that.
I'll I'll just step into that a little bit. Talking to Jack Willingham, the EMA director down there, the CO2 they dealt with down there came from between the oil fields, and it
Yeah.
wasn't pure like the CO2 is going to be off the ethanol plants up here. So it had hydrogen sulfide in it, has a rotten egg smell. And when the rupture happened, that's what the people were trying to get away from. And they did not know there was a CO2 line in the area because it was put there decades ago. And so he said the hydrogen sulfide created people to try to get away from that. But he says, Steve, I have no idea what kind of catastrophe we would have had if that would not have been in there and people just would have been in their homes because it's odorless, colorless, you can't smell it, anything. Who knows what would have happened? And that's one thing that frustrates me. You hear Summit and the pipeline companies say it all the time. Well, this is no different than natural gas. I say, well, wait a minute. You're running this at 2,200 pounds. You run transmission lines at natural gas, 800 or 900. I said, you cut this in half and you go put an odorant in it when it gets around people's homes. And then we can maybe start talking the same thing. Then they don't say anything.
Why don't they want to put an odorant in it?
They say it will corrode the pipes and make them, weaker as time goes on. But I'm sure with today's technology, they could find some way to put something in there.
Sure, and they put odorants in gas, so
If they cared about safety.
right. Right, that's a clear indication, but it does beg the question, why do you need to keep it so pure if you're not going to use it, if you're only going to sequester it? So anyway, but I do want to, Ed, you wanted to address what happened with Jared Bosley is a now very famous rancher in also in McPherson County, South Dakota, and he had a surprise one day when he was out farming his land and his wife was at home recovering from gallbladder surgery. Ed, do you want to address that real quickly?
Sure, and I know that's why I brought it up, Rebecca, because I know you're going to do a great job of addressing that in the documentary that's coming out.
Yes.
That was all filmed over at Jared Bosley's farm that day. What happened in 2023, I believe already now, it's gone that long ago. In April of that year, well, what it was is Jared has been an outspoken opponent of this project. And what we believe was happening is what Summit was trying to do. And I think a lot of these companies will do in other states if they have their way. They picked out somebody to make an example of them, to force them. And that's what this was all about. So they picked on Jared and his family. And they showed up one day. His wife was a nurse, but she happened to be home alone that day. And she was up in the shower. And Summit, two of their surveyors showed up. And they opened the door to their home and walked in and were yelling into the house if anybody was home, and they frightened her and she didn't know who it was. So she stayed in the bathroom in the shower until they left. And then she walked out and she called Jared, who was away from his farm planting crops 12 miles away. And he said, find out who it is. Well, she turned on, they happened to have security cameras on their farm to keep an eye on their cattle operation. And they turned on the security camera and they were across the road in his shop. They had gone into that. So anyhow, she went down and found out after who it was, and she drove down the road and it was Summit. And Jarrett made the comment that if it's Summit, you should call the sheriff, and if sheriff should be involved if Summit's around surveying. He wasn't even there. Well, a few days later, the deputies showed up on their farm and they served papers on Jared Bosley because these surveyors had filled out a affidavit and said that Jared had threatened to shoot them, which he hadn't even talked to him. And so then, lo and behold, we had to go to court in Aberdeen in a circuit court, and we brought our attorney up to represent Jared, and many of us were there. Mark was there, myself, and in the courtroom trying to clear Jared's name. And the judge at that time ruled they had asked for a restraining order on him, and they were trying to get him for contempt of court. The judge did not hold him in contempt of court, but he put a restraining order on him. And he told all of us in the courtroom and told Jared that you have to let Summit come in and survey and do whatever they want to do whenever they want to come. You can't stop them, which we knew was a violation of our Constitution and was against our own trespass law. And our attorney said, well, I want to clear my client's name because they have filed false affidavit here, making allegations that never happened, and we want to clear his name. We have video of them. They had said in the affidavit that they never entered into any of the buildings. Well, we had a video of them. Jared did. And the judge said, this is not the place to clear your client's name. If you want to do that, go do it on social media. We were appalled. And so we did that. We started spreading the word. Well, lo and behold, we appealed that decision to our Supreme Court, but it took a while to get to the court system. And in the meantime, I think it was May, here came Summit again back to Jared's farm to do an actual invasive survey that day with they were drilling 90-foot holes with a huge drilling rig. Jared was gone again. He was hauling grain away from his farm. His kids were home alone, and his wife had to leave work to come home and be with the kids. And I got a call from another neighbor who couldn't get over there, wondering if I could get there as quick as I could to get over there with his wife and kids to see what was going on. And I did. I was the first one there. I live about 8 miles away from Jared. And as I approached his farm, a half a mile in every direction, Summit had security people sitting on the roads, armed security guards with spotting scopes, and they were casing the whole farm. They had his farm surrounded, basically under siege. And as I drove up, there were 2 deputies in the yard, and I asked them what was going on, and they said they were surveying, and they had to let them do it. But anyone that wanted to could go out there and take pictures and video them what they were doing. Jared couldn't because he had a restraining order on him. Okay. It was 104 degrees that day, people, and the wind was blowing 40 miles an hour. We were under a high fire danger. We hadn't any rain for several weeks. Crops were under real stress. Anyhow, they had told the deputies that they would only be there a couple hours. They showed up at 8:30 in the morning, never left till 5 in the afternoon. They were there all day. And they also told them that they weren't going to trample on any cropland. They were only going to go out into pasture. Well, they went right out into the soybean and the cornfields, and that's where they were doing their drilling. So they've lied about everything. But they tried to make an example out of Jared. And so we appealed this to the Supreme Court. It took a while, but that's how we got the decision. Jared came home that day, and I had to keep him. He had a restraining order. He had to be 300 feet away from them. And so I had to keep him across the road. And we did that all day, and he was very good. But they made an example out of him, tried to. There will be consequences for them down the road. But in the meantime, because of what they did to Jared Bosley, that really set off the movement in South Dakota. Because once the word got out, and I remember, I think, Rebecca, you called an interview. We did an interview, Mark and I and Jared at his house that day when you got wind of it. And that set off this whole thing when word started spreading about what they were doing to Jared Bosley. And they could do this to anybody. They just happened to pick him and try to make an example. And I'm telling you, it was hard. If anybody ever met Jared Bosley, he's a pretty tough, rugged individual, and I've known him his whole life. But when he came back to his farm that day and saw what they were doing and how he was under siege, he had tears in his eyes, I'll be honest. And I had tears in my eyes. And he said to me, Ed, look what they're doing to my farm. And I said, Jared, I understand. It's horrible. It's not right. We can't do anything about it. But there will be a day when you will have justice. And that day is coming. And in the meantime, our Supreme Court finally, like I said earlier, took up this case, and they ruled entirely in our favor. They threw out and said that judge erred and that he should never have allowed them to survey his land like that. And no one, to this day, they cannot do any more of those surveys without landowner permission. They can't use eminent domain now to build in South Dakota. They're not carrying a commodity. So we got a complete vindication in the Supreme Court decision. And to this day, at some point in the future, Jared is going to try to get some retribution back from Summit, but we're working on that. But what he
Right.
went through, the only reason I bring it up, because what that young man and his family went through, no one should have to go through that in this country where we're supposed to be free and have rights to our own property,
Right.
where he was basically a hostage on his own farm that day. And I just want to point that out, that I don't want anybody else to go through what he did that day, because this is just wrong. And these companies will resort to those kind of tactics to get their way. And everybody needs to know, if you cooperate with them, this is what happens. They will take advantage of you any way they can. So I just wanted to bring that up. And thank you for allowing me to do that.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I talked to his kids too. And I mean, this was 3 years after the fact. And I talked to his teenage daughter and said, what did you go through that day? And she started to cry. It was trauma. It was traumatic. And those kids will never forget that. In a way, that's going to work to their favor. As they get older, they're going to know, okay, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Listen, I know we're getting late. It's 8:30, and I don't want to tax people's attention spans too long, even though this is, I can't believe we've been talking for an hour and a half. This has been a very quick hour and a half for me, because it's a very stimulating conversation. I do want to encourage people, yes, at the state level and at the county level. At the state level, attack eminent domain, right? And at the county level, really focus on those setbacks. But everybody should be doing that right now. And one tool we hope will be very advantageous for everyone is our documentary that's going to be premiered again 2 weeks from today. We're going to have a webinar just like this to launch it, and everybody can watch it. It's going to be free for viewing for at least 30 days. It's also going to be available on DVD, but it'll be for streaming. And you can take this documentary. It's only an hour long. It's going to be something you can take to your county commissioners to show them, look, this is actually happening. This is real. Let's get prepared. We've got the maps from the Department of Energy included that show all of the pipelines they have planned for the entire United States of America. You can say, see, it's coming. We need to prepare now and get prepared. And let's imitate South Dakota. I know, Steve, Iowa's trying to imitate South Dakota right now too. And there are a lot of hurdles to overcome. But South Dakota's done it. If South Dakota has done it, we can too. Right? Does anybody, I guess we should probably wrap up here. Has everybody addressed what they wanted to address? And do we want to just have a round robin of final comments, or anything I've forgotten? I think we've addressed all of I have a couple more questions, but somebody's asking about the amount of water, but we did address that. So I think I've taken care of all the questions here. Oh, sorry.
Rebecca?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Just from a bird's eye view again, of course, we are fighting property rights in various states throughout the United States, in different forms, right? And all of you probably know about the Bundy situation that was in Oregon several years back. There was a reporter at that time, a freelance reporter, that covered some of that. And right now, Charles and Heather Maud in the state of South Dakota, in the western part of the state, are fighting an indictment, a criminal indictment on them for land that they have farmed and ranched for many years. And basically they're saying this like 100-year-old fence is in the wrong place, and that they have stolen from the federal government this land. And so anyway, very nice couple that I'm told, with wonderful children, and they are being criminally indicted by the federal government for stealing property. And so there will be a delegation of us traveling out to see this fence and land and the situation and look it over on this Sunday. They also have a gag order on them, so they're not allowed to talk about this. They have each had to hire an attorney, their own attorney, like he had to hire one and she had to get a different one. So this is wrong. And so we want to try to get to the bottom of it and raise the flag and say, this is not okay. We just won a property rights battle in South Dakota, and now it looks like we're heading into another battle.
Wow. I've heard about that situation, and it's absolutely jaw-dropping, just like all the situations that we've talked about here, and Jared Bosley and Mark's own situation. Somebody's asking if we can post the information about the documentary, how to access it, and Wendy's behind the scenes right now. I'm going to ask her to do that in chat over here, but we will have that posted. Again, anybody who wants to look into the documentary that we're going to be premiering 2 weeks from today, go to standyourground.watch, and that's where you'll find all the information and how to sign up and register. And please invite friends to watch the documentary too, and spread it around. We've got to take this back. We've got to get out of the easy chairs and take this back, and not let them steamroll us. But all right, I assume that we are done. Steve, did you have any closing thoughts?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to educate people on how they can get organized and how they can look at my checklist, how they can protect their counties, their local, and please share my email address out there if people want to get a hold of me and want to learn about what they can do to get prepared.
What is the website? What are some websites that people can go to? I know South Dakota has some, and Iowa does too.
I don't know as far as a website. I have my email address if they wanted to get
Okay.
a hold
Yeah,
of
go
me.
ahead.
And Wendy has that. If she
Okay.
wanted to put it out there.
Okay, Wendy, you can put that out there too. And Mark and Ed, y'all have any closing comments or contact information, websites to advertise there?
Can I just say one other thing, Rebecca? We
Huh.
do have the Free Soil movement in Iowa, and they
Free
can go
Soil
to that.
Foundation. Yeah.
Yep. They can go to that website. There's tons and tons of information out there on that.
Right, freesoilfoundation.com.
Yep.
Thank you, Barb. Barb just posted that too. And freesoilfoundation.com is one of them, and that's got a lot of information if people need to get in touch.
Yep. I apologize for the
No.
brain fart there.
No, you're good. All right. Well, I think that we are pretty much done for this evening. I want to thank everyone for coming and for participating and sticking it out with us for an hour and a half here. Thank you so much, and Godspeed and God bless. And we will take this country back, county by county, one county at a time, right? God bless you all. Thank you so much for being here.